We good?
We're good.
Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 54th edition of the Modern Woodworkers Association online discussion about all things woodworking. Today's special guest, well, we're going to torpedo today's special guest, and they will feel the sting from us because what they're doing is completely underhanded and totally just awful. But before we get to the roasting, let me introduce you to the usual panel. I'm Tom Iavino of Tom'sWorkbench.com, and I'll be your host of the program. Joining me tonight also from frigid cold Long Island, New York, is Dyami Pilatki. Dyami, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Tom. I'm inside. I'm warm. I got a sweatshirt on. I'll be all right.
Yeah, welcome to summer up north. The funny thing is you were freezing outside earlier at a baseball game. I am sitting in my shop right now where it's 89 degrees. So we're getting the extremes. The person in the middle, however, who would normally moderate this, his name, Chris Atkins, isn't with us tonight. That bum is out traveling, so it's going to be the two of us.
Chris will be missed, but somehow we'll make do.
We'll somehow figure something out. But in the meantime, Dyami, tell me what's on your bench. What's going on in your shop?
Well, in the shop, I just got my new planer set up. There's a planer I picked up from Steve Taylor down in Virginia, Torch2 on the Twitters, Torch02. He's shipping off to Germany, I believe on the 1st. It's very soon, if not exactly the 1st, then very soon.
Oh, my God, I can't believe that.
I know, we're going to miss him. He's going to be there for, I think he's going to be there for 3 years plus.
Wow.
I think that's what the time frame was. I talked to him about it. Clearly, I paid attention.
I like the way you do that.
Yeah.
That's very special about you, Dyami.
Yeah. He had to basically get rid of most of his shop before he shipped off for shipping reasons, for the fact that it was all 110. He's going to a land of 220 and many reasons like that. And something about the Hertz, even the 220 apparently was the wrong Hertz for their 220.
The Hertz,
yeah.
I tell you.
So anyway, I was lucky enough to pick up his planer. So I've got a nice new 15-inch Grizzly in the shop.
Holy smokes.
It's a beast. It was quite the effort to get it in and out of the van, but
well, I'm sure that's a lot. That's a lot of iron right there.
Yeah, it's a lot of planer. And I posted pictures when I was doing it. I had to build this ramp, and it wasn't so hard at Steve's because the ramp was steep, but I used a come along to pull it up into the van. But I knew there was no way I would get it out of the van without breaking it if I had the ramp that steep. So I ended up extending the ramp. The ramp was about, I don't know, 12 or 15 feet long to get from the bumper of a normal van to my shop floor at lower pitch as possible. But it worked out, and I got the planer, and I've rewired the outlets and stuff so that it fits. I mean, I had the 220, it's 220, but there's a million different 220 outlets.
Oh, sure.
And plugs. So the ones Steve had, of course, are not the ones I use, so I switched that over. But now it's up and running, and I got a couple of boards on my bench that I'm just testing out some different dies on because I have to fix a clock. I have to match the finish, so isn't that always the funnest part of a project, is matching somebody else's finish?
Yeah, I'd much rather start from scratch. I'll tell you. I've had people say, well, maybe you should try, seeing if you can match. No, I'd rather start from scratch for you.
Problem is, it's a 90-ish year old clock. Nothing too fancy, thankfully, but it's curved and it's got a bell shape to it, and it's an heirloom to the people who own it, and they've got this nice little nick in the front, and it's veneered, and it's this really dark brown, almost black. So I'm thinking I can just patch this little bit, and I promised them I wouldn't make it worse.
That's what do they say? The Hippocratic Oath: first thing, do no harm. Yeah. So you definitely want to start with that.
What do you got going on in your shop?
Well, actually,
are your tools melting in the heat?
They're not melting yet. I mean, we got a few more months to go before we actually get into the I can't believe I'm still alive and breathing phase of the summer here in Florida. But we're actually in prime season for me at work. For those of you who don't know, I'm an emergency management communications person. And here on the Gulf Coast of Florida, the big emergency we prepare people for is hurricane season. And that's coming up on Sunday, June 1st. We'll be entering the Atlantic phase of the hurricane season, which will be 6 months of fun and excitement. So as we wait to see what happens, I remember a couple years ago going up to New York and actually seeing you, Dyami, at your house after Hurricane Sandy. So the kind of stuff that we just have to get ready for, and it's funny because now's a really good time to remind people. I think maybe the first part of our little podcast tonight might be a candid discussion about disasters in shops. Because
I think that's a good topic.
the timing is right, and it's one of those situations where where we're in the summer, people are starting to think, well, I'm going to go on vacation for a little bit, maybe leave the shop. You see a lot of things with heavy rains in certain areas, a lot of flooding in certain areas. Of course, anybody in the Gulf Coast or the Atlantic Coast understands the threat that's posed by hurricanes. Hurricane season is already underway in the Pacific as well, so anybody in the western coast of Mexico, Southern California, you get into the Hawaiian Islands, the threats there as well. So anywhere else around the world, there's always the potential. So I don't want to just limit us to the Americans. But there's a couple things you have to think about when you're getting ready for disasters for your shop. You try to disaster-proof your shop. And the first thing you got to think about is you got to know what the risks are. It's funny. You think, well, wherever you live, there's no risk, right? But wherever you live, there's always something. It's funny. My mom told me I was nuts for moving to Florida because of all the hurricanes. She's up in New Jersey. And since then, they've had Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Irene and Hurricane Floyd, so you go down the list of these hurricanes that affected the East Coast. So while they think Florida is the one that's most vulnerable, they've still been hit. So hurricanes are out there. But I mean, if you live in the Midwest, there's always tornadoes. In the West Coast or some other areas, it's very there's earthquake prone.
Right.
So understanding what your risks are. Plus, anybody can have a shop fire. Anybody can have a burglary. And that would be a disaster because, your stuff goes missing. Somebody could break in and start taking your tools. And that's really not good. I know a lot of people have a lot of money invested in clamps and other tooling. So the first thing is you have to understand what your risk is. Know what's out there. The next thing you want to do is, you want to understand what you've got. How long have you been woodworking, Dyami?
Oh, let's say 15 years, something.
Okay, so I've been roughly the same amount of time. And over those 15 years, it's taken a long time to accumulate what you had in the shop, right? It just didn't show up one day in the back of a truck. So what happens is, we accumulate things over 15 years, and you get a tool here and a tool there, and you replace an old tool with a new one and all this other stuff. But what happens is most insurance policies, homeowners insurance policies and renters insurance policies will cover your contents. But they're not going to replace anything that you can't prove that you own. It's kind of, think of it this way, you get the house fire, suddenly you tell the adjuster, oh, I've got that big 70-inch plasma TV in the living room. They're going to want to see some sort of evidence before they buy you a brand new one. So before you go to the insurance agent and say, oh, look, I've got that Powermatic 2000 saw sitting out there, you want to have some evidence that at some point you actually own something like that. So a shop inventory is a really simple and important thing to do. And, the beauty about, today...
I'm assuming you want to back it up. Oh, you want to back up that inventory with photos, not just a list?
Oh, exactly. And the funny thing is, now in 2014 with smartphones everywhere, there are so many applications on smartphones that'll help you inventory a room. It's ridiculously easy. You could write down, you can always do it the traditional way, just write down what tools you have, the models, the serial numbers, things like that. If you still have the receipts, staple them to them.
What if you kind of found them on the back of a truck?
Well, there's that too.
But even in that case, you could get the model and serial number.
Yeah, you could do that. Another thing people do is they can go around and take pictures. Now, in the digital camera age, you don't spend the money to develop the film, and hopefully, you hope you got the shots.
Speaking of that for a second, Tom, this is a little divergent, but could I borrow your Laguna 14 SUV and just for a couple photos?
Sure, why not? We'll just ship it up there. Actually, I'll take a picture of it, and you could Photoshop it in your shop.
That's probably what we should not do in the case of this, right?
I'm not advocating insurance fraud here. Just let's make that clear. This is not an advocation for insurance fraud.
But again, the trick is to take pictures of things you actually own in your shop.
And the thing is, like if you have stuff stored in drawers, like drill bits and chisels and things like that, open them up and take pictures of that as well. Because all these things, it adds up. Buying a new set of chisels can easily run you $200 if you're going to buy a real high-end set. So if you did invest in a high-end set, you want to get a picture of this. The other thing you got to remember is that stuff is stuff. Okay, stuff is stuff. So don't ever let me find you saying, I'm going to stay behind in the shop to protect my things from the hurricane, the flood, from the fire. No. Stuff is stuff. You started this world with nothing in your possession. You'll leave with nothing in your possession. The stuff that you have in your shop is completely replaceable. My neighbors had a house fire in 2004, and they lost everything. If you go to the house today, 10 years later, it's the show place of the neighborhood because everything was able to be replaced. But they weren't there at the house when it burnt because they were out on vacation by pure dumb luck.
Wow.
So the idea being that you don't want to be where the disaster is going to be. You want to be away from it, saving yourself, because everything else can be replaced. Tools, wood, everything. So don't stay behind and try to protect anything. If it's gone, it's gone. Just understand that. There's a reason why we buy insurance.
In the case of a weather event where you're going to be evacuated, something like that, the trick then is make sure you have your inventory, and that's really the only thing you need to take. And you don't spend time worrying about the shop. Certainly don't stay for the shop. Just get your ass out of there so you stay safe.
Yeah, definitely. And the funny thing about the apps and with Google Drive and Dropbox and all this other stuff, you can upload all that stuff to the cloud. And you don't even have to worry about having the paper copies of anything anymore. As long as you've got those things, you can scan them in, you can shoot them up to the cloud, retrieve them from anywhere. If you're, staying with relatives 4 states over after the disaster, you can bring all that stuff up and show it to your insurance agent, and that's a good thing. Again, what you want to do is some really simple things with disaster-proofing your shop. Again, read your policy. It's be amazed how many people will have to buy insurance because they have a mortgage, but they never read their policy. So they don't have any idea what's covered. For most people in your home, unless you're running a business out of your house with your tools, you're covered under your homeowner's policy. So if you got your chop saw, your table saw, your bandsaw, it's all covered under your homeowner's policy.
Right, and if you are running that business, quite frankly, you should have insurance for that business.
Business insurance as well, because if that's how you're putting bread on the table, you definitely want to have insurance so you can get back on your feet. One of the key things to remember about disasters is any business that goes through one, typically, it's like 60% of small businesses never reopen. They'll just close their doors and that's it. So if you want to beat the odds, make sure you have your insurance and your documentation.
Absolutely. We saw that I'm sure you guys see it with your hurricanes too, but with Sandy, we saw a lot of small businesses that never came back.
Yeah, just, Katrina, Ike, you see it all over the place. And it's a sad thing because people have worked so hard all their lives to invest that money and then they lose everything and that's it. So again, you need to have that plan in place. Now, some insurance companies, I understand, can actually, if there's a disaster coming, like a hurricane, gives us days of notice, may actually even pay you to move some of your equipment to a safer location. So if you're down in an area that has to evacuate, check your policy because you may be entitled to money to move that tooling up to a storage unit high and dry. So if you can do that, that's a pretty easy way to take care of your tools. Also, anything with any really sentimental value that you can carry with you, identify that in advance. So for instance, if you have your grandfather's plane, a set of chisels that you were given to you by somebody who took you under their wing. Identify those tools and know where they are. So this way, make a list of those things you want to grab out of the shop. And I'm not saying grab everything, but just grab those things that are sentimental, that mean the most to you, and be sure to leave with those. And then the rest of the stuff, just make sure you got good documentation on. Listen, if you evacuate and you come back to your shop and it's all still there, so much the better. But if it does happen, if the disaster does befall you, you don't want to be there. Pick up the pieces afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. You come back, it's all there. No harm, no foul. Everything's just like it was.
Yeah, seriously, go right back to work.
You come back and it's all gone, you're still back. That's the important part.
Yeah, that's critical. Kyle Barton, I wrote on my blog a story of Kyle Barton, Short Bus Woodworking. His house got flooded by Hurricane Ike back in 2008. We actually took pictures, and I wrote a story, or a 2-part story about it. The funny thing about that was that I put that on my website when I was over at the Governor's Hurricane Conference a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And Bill Reed, who was the Hurricane Center director at the time, read the articles. And he came up to me and said that was one of the most effective things that anybody had done in a long time for hurricane education, because it showed here's what can happen. Here's what somebody did that was smart. They took care of all they could, and then they just came back and restored everything afterwards. So again, it's one of those things where you have to think logically. Okay, don't think with your heart. You got to think with your brain. You want to be safe yourself, and then everything else is stuff and can be replaced.
I thought you thought with that other thing that was neither your heart nor your
Well,
brain.
there's other things that we think with, but not with hurricanes and fires and earthquakes and things like that.
So hurricanes equal think with your head.
Think with this one.
Gotcha.
Think with the one up above the shoulders. Okay, that's a good place to use that.
I'm not going there.
And I will tell you this: for people who have a potential to flood, and 1/3 of all flood losses happen in low to moderate risk areas. So 33% of all flood losses happen in these higher dry areas, supposedly. Your homeowner policy in the United States does not cover flooding. It hasn't since the late 60s. So if you are in an area that could potentially flood, and here in Florida we get rain like you wouldn't believe, flood insurance is going to be a critical component. And if you're in a low to moderate risk group, it's very inexpensive, maybe $300 a year.
No, that's what I was going to say. Is living on a tiny little island, I know, though thankfully I don't live in the flood zone.
Sure.
I do understand how very expensive it can be to have flood insurance when you do live on the water. But that being said, it was my understanding that if you're outside of the direct flood zone, the flood insurance is very, very cheap, and it's almost a no-brainer that you should get it because you get so many different ways you can flood that you don't expect.
And that's the thing. I mean, if the water rises, your insurance company is not going to pay out. And the thing is, I mean, when you think about something like Hurricane Katrina, there were people who didn't flood during Hurricane Camille in 1969, thought they were safe, decided not to buy flood insurance because how much worse can it be than Hurricane Camille? Well, Katrina pushed more water ashore. And places that hadn't flooded back in 1969 flooded in 2005. I remember interviewing somebody who who got through both storms. She has her hurricane merit badge. She's done. She doesn't have to do any more. She's proved herself to me. What happened was she didn't have flood insurance, and the only thing she was able to collect was about $10,000 in flood relief, in insurance relief, and that was it. $10,000 isn't going to be able to replace anything in your house.
No.
So definitely. If you're in a flood zone, you're definitely going to be required by your mortgage company to have it. If you're outside of a flood risk zone, in an X zone, you're going to have to consider flood insurance as something because it potentially could flood. The only place you can get flood insurance, except for a few places you can buy it outside, is the federal flood insurance program, which is at floodsmart.gov, and they have a little calculator on the front page. So if you can just click on it, put your address in, and it'll tell you what your zone in is and roughly what your premium is going to be for the year. So again, it's a little bit of a tool. Then you buy it from your insurance broker. They have access to the line for the federal program. You don't call the Fed to do it. You do it locally through your insurance company.
Right,
and they'll be able to set you up. From
what I understand, talking to my broker, all flood insurance these days is going through the federal government.
It's the Fed, yeah. The late 1960s. The insurance companies managed to get a law passed where they were excluded because flood is a very repetitive risk. You'll see homes along rivers, homes along lakes, homes along the ocean start to flood constantly, and they keep rebuilding the homes, and after a while it became such a repetitive risk that they asked the federal government to pick up the cost, and basically your premium goes to fund that. So that's how it works. The flood insurance program does that, and then if there's a flood on the Mississippi River or flooding, from a hurricane in the Gulf, it'll pay out of that fund. The other thing is if you renter's insurance is a smart idea too. I know some people rent homes where they've got a shop that it's either in an outbuilding or someplace in the home, or maybe they rent a house and they've got it in the garage or whatever. Renter's insurance is important too because the owner of the property has insurance for the structure. So if the place burns down, they'll get the place rebuilt, but your contents aren't covered under that policy. So the real thing you want to do is make sure you've got coverage for your contents. Renter's insurance is pretty inexpensive as well. It protects you from a lot of things. If somebody slips and falls in your house, you're protected with that. So I'm going to replace your contents just like a homeowner's policy. It's just only contents. So again, renter's insurance isn't the worst idea either. You can see I do this for a living. This is kind of fun. But you know what? I mean, I can't go back. I can't stress enough that your stuff is just stuff. I mean, I know it's near and dear to all of us. We're woodworkers. We love our craft, but it's just stuff. So
Mm.
never put yourself in a place where you're going to risk your life to protect stuff, okay? You protect your
Absolutely.
family, yes, but you don't protect your stuff like that. That's important.
Well said, Tom.
Now I need to keep talking to the media tomorrow and keep getting ready for all this because hurricane season starts and we're going to be busy as
You know
we
what?
can.
You say hurricane season starts on June 1st?
You got it. Runs to November 30th.
Do you know what ends on June 1st?
But the winter?
Flu season.
Oh, flu season. What is that to another?
I'm doing some work at a hospital, and we can't start until June 1st because we can't
flu
verify
season.
that we've all had our flu shot. So we can't actually get it. We're not allowed in the building to do work until flu season is over on June 1st.
It's always something, Dyami. It's funny because here in Florida, we think hurricane. January through March is the most dangerous time in Florida for tornadoes.
Really? I didn't know you got tornadoes.
Really, we have a tornado season, and actually, they get the cold fronts that cut all the way down to the Gulf, and we get some fairly strong tornadoes. Nothing like Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, nothing like that, but EF3, EF2 tornadoes come through.
I know we started this conversation by saying that there are risks for everywhere, but
Yes.
Now at the end of this conversation, I'm thinking you might have more risks than most.
Yeah, but I mean, you guys can still get hit by hurricanes and tornadoes up in New York. There was a tornado a couple years ago that went right through Brooklyn.
There are, but I wouldn't say we have a tornado season.
Spring. Spring, honestly. When the air changes, when the air masses change, the cold air gets pushed back by the warm air, you see a lot of tornadoes. And same thing in the fall. There's a secondary season in the fall when the cold fronts start coming down. So, we don't have earthquakes here.
Neither do we.
So, we're okay. Well, you guys, there was that one that shook Washington, D.C. a couple of years back. So,
yeah. I tell you, that was the weirdest thing.
I imagine it must have been.
But,
I imagine it must have been.
Anyway, we've digressed quite a ways from woodworking.
Yes, we have. But, again, disaster, can happen anywhere, so just be ready. Have a plan. Make sure you know your stuff. And from there, you can recover. There's somebody we don't want to recover, though, however. There's somebody we wish ill upon. Shannon Rogers today discovered something online that I think I want you to start off with, Dyami, because it's very egregious.
I'm going to introduce him as asshat because that was the term that Shannon used. I think it's very appropriate. I'm using him. Quite frankly, I noticed this during this afternoon, as I'm sure you did, Tom, when Shannon pointed it out to everybody on Twitter. And I've unfortunately not had the opportunity to do a thorough investigation of this asshat. So I can't tell you anyone's actual name, but what we're referring to is a YouTube channel that's called Woodwork, 2 words, lowercase letters. And it's, I don't know, a couple dozen videos made by people we know who are not someone who work.
Yes.
There's some videos from Shannon. There's some videos from Greg Paolini, some videos from Fine Woodworking, some videos with Asa, some videos with Ed, some videos with Mario Rodriguez, some videos of Woodworkers Guild of America, and I'm blanking on his name, but these are all, and I'm sure I'm missing other ones. I'm looking at the thumbnails right now and just listing the people who I can tell you their name just by looking at them.
And in years past, similar sites have taken the Yankee Workshop. They've taken Mark Spagnuolo's stuff. They've taken Matt Vanderlist's stuff, and they pirated that as well. And the thing is, if you've got a name out there, you're working your butt off.
Yeah.
You are the folks who put together videos, who regularly put out educational videos for woodworking, are busting their butts. In many cases, they aren't full-time woodworkers. In many cases, they are doing this in the shop for the love of the craft, or they are doing this as professionals, and this is how they're feeding their families and making their mortgage payments.
And let's just be a little clear about this. Beyond just taking the video sounds a bit vague. What this account is doing is promoting the videos as their own on their own channel and monetizing on them. They're monetizing on their YouTube channel with pre-roll ads. So when the ad rolls before Shannon's video about making a toolbox, Shannon doesn't get the ad revenue he deserves, but the schmuck who's controlling the Woodwork YouTube channel gets the video.
You
Um,
know, it's amazing to see just how brash and how just ballsy these folks can be. You know, it's not just videos; it's also plans. Anybody who's ever been on the internet knows of Ted's woodworking plans. I'm going to tell you this right now, folks. If you see anybody who says Ted's 16,000 woodworking plans, and you see a link to that, report it immediately to whomever controls that website, because that is nothing but just flat out piracy. You know, to steal somebody's content and then sell it is piracy. You know, just as if I had gone into your shop, Dyami, took your clamps and sold them, and took the content and took the money, that's stealing.
yes.
Basically, what they're doing is they're taking the plans from magazines, from people who've taken the time, the videos, the plans, the articles, and they're just taking them, they're putting them on a site with lots of links, so you click the stuff and you buy the stuff and they get paid, or they're selling the plans or the discs of the plans for profit. And their defense, and a defense is, well, they're just assembling them. They're still stealing. Now, I mean, really it comes down to this. If you support it by buying, then you are just supporting theft, flat out. And that's just as wrong can be. The woodworking community is full of so many bright, intelligent, generous people who will do anything for another woodworker. And seeing it in person, seeing somebody who maybe has lost a shop, people donating to this person, and then to see somebody take advantage of that generosity just sucks.
Yeah, and I think this, I'm not going to beat too hard on here. I think everyone listening understands what's wrong with taking someone else's plans and monetizing on them, or someone else's video or monetizing on them, or there have been other cases where they've, taken blog posts and promoted them as their own. Mm-hmm. And there's a subtle line here because, we all are part of this community, and we should all be promoting and linking to each other's content. But the trick there is to make it clear that it's someone else's content, I embed one of your YouTube videos. That's great. I'll say, look, here's Tom's video. Just last week, I embedded one of David Picciuto's videos in my blog post, saying it was his. And I don't know if he monetizes his YouTube channel or not, but it was the link from his channel. That's what we do, is we promote each other. We write about what we know, and we link to the rest, and that's part of the community. But what I see happen. What I love about the community that I see happen around sites like this are, Shannon tweeted about this again, asshat, using his term, which is as accurate as any I could come up with.
There are a few synonyms that would do better.
Yeah. I think he tweeted about it late this morning. And just in the course of this afternoon and this evening, I've seen a couple dozen people come out in support and call this guy out and lodge complaints against him, and all the things we should do as a community to support the people who are making content and condemn those who are stealing content. Mm-hmm. And you talk to anybody who's been in the community for any amount of time, and they all know Ted and his woodworking plans and how scummy that whole system is. So, on the one hand, we're calling a spade, and this is intolerable, and none of us should support this. But on the other hand, I think it's wonderful to see how much support we do see for those people who are being ripped off, and how the community as a whole kind of circles the wagons around the people who have created the content and work to support them and to communally condemn those who are doing wrong.
I mean, just to think, about how much knowledge Steve Ramsey brings to the table, how much he shared, and he's making money on this, and that's good for him because he deserves to. This is the kind of stuff where he's putting out product that's just, it's great. To look at what Shannon's doing and what Mark is doing and what, just go down the list and to see what the magazines are doing. And it's just, the reality is this, go to the source, get your information from the source, and understand that if, these people are out there just stealing, and it's just so low to drop to that level, but unfortunately, they're everywhere, and they're hidden. And that's the thing. They post these links. I remember there was just one on on Facebook just the other day. It was one like, hey, summer's coming, find some deck plans. And then you clicked on the link, and sure enough, it was right back to Ted. And it's just so subtle, and it's just so tweaked in there that you've got to really keep your eyes open and make sure you are getting it from the source and then actually benefiting the people who are designing it. Besides, how many, do you really need like 87 dining room table plans? I mean, you need one that's good. So go to find somebody who does a really good job developing plans and see what they've got.
I would agree. Forgetting the fact that they are stolen, and you shouldn't support them for that reason. Just on the front of it, if there's 16,000 plans in a book, how can any of them be good?
Seriously. I mean, and it's on a disc. Oh, and the funny thing was, I'd written an article for Wood Magazine a couple years back about this, and the 16,000 plans is really only close to like 7, and probably 40% of them are duplicates, and then really just like a picture of a page in a book, and you're supposed to interpret from that what it is. You can go to a library. Now, this is really a foreign concept to a lot of folks. You can drive to a library and check out a book.
Get out.
And build a plan out of that. If I really am interested in building something, I'll go to the building where they put the books called the library. And because of my library card, I can go in. That's my little license to go in and look at plans that have been purchased for the community use. And if I want to build something out of it, I can. If I see something online, I'm going to go right to the source and see if I need to buy that plan. I'm going to buy it from that originator. I'm not going to go through any backdoor thing to try to get it on a disc of 22,000 plans. That's just silly. I'm going to go right to the source because you know why? In the event that I have a question about that plan, I know who to email. So when if I buy it from Popular Woodworking Magazine, I can email the editors over there and say, I'm not sure about this. What does this mean? You get that 16,000 plans, you're on your own. And really, it ends up being a doormat. It ends up being a paperweight you put on your desk after a while.
Absolutely, but I think that's kind of that's almost a side point. I mean, yes, that's a benefit of going to the actual person is you get to communicate with them. And I don't know a single woodworker, professional or otherwise, who won't answer the question or the email. But even before you get to that point, it's just the right thing to do. You don't steal a plan from somebody.
Of course. And just to watch this in action just makes me want to take a shower. I just can't understand. And there's so many. And really, if you're that interested in making money in woodworking by creating plans, you can do it. I mean, there's you can do it. I mean, honestly.
I'm sorry. I was just when you said if you're that interested in making money in woodworking, I thought you were going into a company. No money here to be made.
There's no money to be made here. But think about it. Say you design something. Say you design, I don't know, some ridiculous gewgaw or doodad or whatever it is. A lot of magazines will buy plans. So if you come up with a brilliant plan for something, they'll buy it.
What is it?
Not, and you could put it up online. You can actually sell it.
Isn't that what Sawtooth Ideas does?
Yeah, they do that. Yeah, and you look around. There's other sites. I mean, you can work with some of these other You Build It and all these other plans. If you have a good plan, you could market it. Just tell them, hey, look, here's a crazy idea for something. They might buy it. They might give you $300-400 for it if it's a good idea. Maybe you get a free tool out of it. But I mean, the idea that you're just going to rip people off, how do you sleep at night? How do you look yourself in the face in the mirror every day? I just can't understand it. And it's such a multi-level marketing thing. And I've seen videos where they go out to Ted's headquarters someplace, and it's a non-existent address in some town. I've seen this happen on YouTube, and it's ridiculous. They're able to find the clip art that is Ted.
Those kinds of
clip
videos.
Art collection. I mean, it's just scuzzy. It's just slimy. I mean, there's nothing there, and I know that all the magazines are working together to get the cease and desist for a lot of this stuff. And whenever they see it pop up, they have to go after it. Now they're spending their time chasing down people who are violating the copyright instead of designing more woodworking plans. You know what I'm saying? It's ridiculous. It's a waste of energy.
Absolutely.
And that's energy that can be better spent woodworking. And if you're new to the woodworking community, if you've never really been out there and met folks, go to your local guild meeting, find out how cool woodworkers are, and find out how awesome they are to each other. Find out how much they want to help each other out. You'll be surprised that people will do this. And it's this community, and that's the only word you can use to describe it. It's a real community. And we look out for each other. And that's, that's part of the reason why when Shannon posted that, the explosion of comments on YouTube was right there, because we all stand by each other. Because, we're a community, and we do it for each other.
Absolutely.
My goodness, I'm feeling all soap opera-y today. Soapboxy, that's what I feel like. Without Chris, we could talk a lot more because, Chris isn't here. He usually throws in his comments every so often. We get a little bit more going. And since I was born across the Hudson and you were on the other side, we got this simpatico thing going on.
Yeah, I think we can work this out.
It starts to happen like that. What's wrong with you people? Come on, you know what I'm saying? So what are you thinking, Dyami? We're closing in here. We're about, half an hour in? What do we got? What else we got?
Shit, you put me on the spot. I thought we were going to wrap this thing up.
Let's wrap it up then. I'm thinking, these poor people have to listen to us go on and on like this. Next thing we're going to start talking about pizzerias or something like that.
I would just let me bring in one other topic. Just how far between spectrums of woodworking do you go? What I mean by is, I'll use myself as an example. I just finished that quilt rack, which was one of the most intense things I've built.
Mm-hmm.
And on Saturday, in one day, I'm planning, maybe not successfully, but planning to knock out a picnic table and a planter tray of some sort for my mom. They're both outdoor projects. Okay. There's no real joinery in both of them. One's going to be pocket screws. One's going to be bolts. They're much closer to carpentry than fine woodworking.
Sure.
And the quilt rack was the extreme end of fine woodworking, at least for me. And I think I tend to be more in the woodworking camp, but I occasionally swing the other way. And actually, we were talking about Shannon before. He's been renovating his shop, and he's made a couple comments about how liberating it is to not have to meet tolerances when I'm hanging the wall. And I'm saying, Shannon, if you've got gaps that are really that big, you're not doing it quite right. You do need them to fit. But that being said, I understand the point.
But there are shims.
There are shims. So,
there's a reason why shims are sold in bulk, okay?
Do you tend to find that, if things are in your shop, Tom, do they have to meet some minimum build type?
No.
I don't even want to use the word standard.
No. Listen to this. I've built projects that have taken a long time to build. Like the hope chests for my nieces.
Yeah.
Actually, I've got one coming up March next year. I got to start thinking about. But that's a fee. That's a piece I know I'm going to invest myself in. I know I'm going to be looking for the right grain pattern. I'm going to be looking for the right piece of wood to go in there. I'm not going to be really trying to get airtight joints. But you know what? There are sometimes I do want to knock something out. And I found sometimes that, especially during the summer when it's really hot out here, the air conditioner chugs along and does an okay job. But there's sometimes you just need that fix. I got to go out and build something. And I will come out to the shop and I will knock out the simplest projects, like a little wine glass holder that goes over the top of the bottle you can put two wine glasses into. Just something simple, because you know why? You got to get that. You got to get the sawdust in the air. You got to get the wood out. You got to plane it. You got to look at it. The past couple of years, I've tried to build big projects in the summer. It didn't really work that well. But to be able to just walk out and do something quick. That meets, and the funny thing is, usually somebody comes up to you and says, "Can you do it for me?" You're like, "Of course." Today, somebody at work asked me if I could build him a set piece because he's doing some community theater, and he wants me to actually give him a hand building some set pieces. I'm like, "Sure, why not?" I'm between projects right now, so I've got the space, I've got the time. Once hurricane season begins, and I can go back to a more normal work schedule. But again, it's the kind of thing where if I can do it and it can knock it out, it makes him happy, and it makes the people in his play happy, that's great for me. So I'll jump back and forth between the two of them. And, I can guarantee when December rolls around, I'm going to be putting a lot of time into that hope chest to get that done in time for March, so I know that it's done right, and I've got it. It's going to be a nice
right. Project. No, and there are definitely some projects you'd be foolish not to put everything you have into.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if I'm going to scale these back so much just because I want to break from spending weeks and weeks on a single project. Or it could be that they're projects that don't particularly interest me and I just want them done, or just that they don't necessarily merit it. You know, I could spend a morning building a picnic table, or I could spend a month building a picnic table, and I'm not sure that at the end of the day, the month-long picnic table is going to last all that much longer, be that much more functional. I don't know what that extra time brings in a project like that. It's a utilitarian project. As long as it holds people, it holds food, and it doesn't give splinters, what else does it have to do?
You know, I mean, but by definition, any table should meet that.
Oh, that's true.
Any table should meet that definition. Whether you're building a trestle table out of gorgeous curly cherry, or if you're banging something together out of pressure-treated pine in the backyard, they both have to meet the same requirements. It's just that one's going to be in a different situation.
Yeah, and that's absolutely part of it. And I think at some point something pretty can certainly be in the backyard, whereas if it's going to go in the dining room, I would say it needs to be pretty too, whatever your standard of pretty is.
You know, it's the kind of thing that's got to be a quality balance. Yeah.
Right. But the thing is, you know, if I'm making a kitchen table or a dining room table, I would expect it to at least be passed on to my kids, if not their kids. That would be the goal. Who's to say how long it actually lasts? But that would be the goal. Whereas the picnic table, it lasts, I don't know, 6, 7 years. It's going to rot out. You know, like, I know it's not a permanent item. It's never going to get passed on to people. It's going to get thrown out while I'm still living here in the house using it. So just on that regard, as long as my joinery lasts as long as the rot does, I'm in good shape.
Yeah. And you know, it just comes down to what the purpose is. If you're building with the idea in mind that you're building an heirloom, you're going to invest that time. If you're building to meet a need, sometimes, you know, when it can be outside, it can be a little rougher. You know, it depends how much you want to put into it. I've seen people, believe me, I've seen people sweat details on picnic tables where they put the 2 months in and everything's cut to specific and scribed, and that's great. More power to you. But if you're building an antique, you want to do that. If you're building out of pressure-treated pine, more power to you if you want it. Develop your skills. If that's where you want to be with it, then develop your skills. Want to hand-cut dovetails and pressure-treated pine? By all means, do it. Whatever makes you happy.
Hey, you know,
who am I to judge?
I've done hand-cut dovetails on OSB.
I've seen them.
Yes.
And they were beautiful.
Weren't they?
They were things of beauty. Holy smokes. You're reminding me now of all the things you've done that are a little cuckoo, okay? So.
Well, I'm going to go down this rabbit hole for 2 seconds, then we're going to wrap this up. But
okay.
My bench didn't get instantly spurred along by a trip to Germany like Steve Taylor's did. So my bench is just as disassembled as his was a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I'm doing, because I'm easily turned on by peer pressure, is I'm going to attempt to build my bench entirely out of man-made materials.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to see how that goes. I think it's going to be all right, but we'll see how that goes. But one of the biggest issues I've had is years ago when I decided I was going to build the bench and then put it all on hold. But in that first phase of building the bench, I kind of took a Lee Valley vise of some sort and took it to a machinist I knew and had a hand wheel put on it and had it remachined a little bit so I can make it into a leg vise.
Sure.
But I need to make the handle, the little wooden handle that goes on the wheel to turn for the vise. I wanted to turn that handle out of OSB because it's all man-made stuff. Well, Mark Hochstein was nice enough to volunteer to try it for me, and I've not yet been at the point where I need it, so he's not done it yet. But I can always send him a block of timber strand, and he's going to try to turn it for me. But here's the thought: is recently Fine Woodworking had an article by Christian Bexford about how to make handles, like drawer pulls, on the drill press using rasps instead of making them on the lathe. Okay. It was a really interesting article. And is it Brian Grella from Garage Woodworks?
I think so.
Yeah, Brian. So
yeah, Brian, yeah.
Brian last weekend, I think maybe it was 2 weeks ago, but recently Brian tried the same technique. And again, we're talking about, giving credit where it's due. Brian was very upfront about he was doing the fine woodworking technique, and he shot his own video about it, mentioning fine woodworking and, covered all the bases, didn't steal any of the ideas, but did his own demonstration and his own take on the method and talked about how he basically fell in love with it and thinks it's a fantastic method to make draw pulls. Now, I don't really have a need for shaker-style draw pulls, but it dawned on me that this would probably be a better way to turn OSB using rasps in a drill press than using gouges in a lathe. So that kind of brought me back to my workbench, and I watched Brian's video thinking to myself, I could use this to make my workbench knob.
Okay.
When
are we going to attempt this?
I don't know. See, here's the thing: is I have my list of things I need to do. Once I knock out these two tables, I actually have to get back to the treehouse. The treehouse still needs work. Yeah, it needs a roof and some paint, and railings.
Holy smokes! This treehouse, the kids are going to be out of college by the time this is done.
It'll still be there.
You're right. It still will be there. It'll be the place for the grandkids, Dyami. Come on.
Well, but so in the fall, it's probably going to be fall by the time I get back into a project that I really want to do because of the treehouse and other stuff that goes on during the summer and whatnot. But I'm not sure if my next project for me is going to be a workbench or a chair. And I have a funny feeling it's going to be a chair.
Yeah, it's one of those things, Dyami, where you need the workbench, but you're going to put it off forever. I
probably am, yeah. I've got all the lumber for it in my attic. I've got, I just need to build it. I'm at the point where I've got everything I need. I just have to actually stop and build it.
I can be up there with a trailer full of Southern Yellow Pine. We'll bang together Nicholson for you. You'll be set. You'll be good to go.
Here's the deal, Tom. I'll take you up on that.
6 hours and go get some of that good, famous Long Island barbecue after that.
Could you believe they closed?
Oh, no. Where am I going to get this stuff?
Well, they happen to have another branch like a half hour away that's still on Long Island, but that one that was so close to me that we used to go to all the time closed. I was taking Ed Pernick from Fine Woodworking out to lunch, and I was going to take him there, and we get there and it's closed. It's a different restaurant. We ended up going in anyway, and it was some sort of hipster Mexican food is what they had, which it was okay, but it wasn't what I was expecting.
We need Long Island barbecue. Come on.
Yeah. But anyway, if you throw that Southern Yellow Pine on a trailer and schlep it up here, here's what we'll do. It'll set up in the driveway, and you'll build the Nicholson. I'll build my clock workbench, and we'll just build them side by side as a group build.
And we'll have Google Plus try to actually put it up on a live broadcast.
So we can fit it into that 8-hour live broadcast.
Well, there'll be a lot of cursing, I can guarantee. You're going to have to beep every bit of it. Well, with that being said, Dyami, it sounds like some sort of challenge coming up sometime. We'll have to do it when it's daylight and it's warm in Long Island.
Absolutely. I'm thinking maybe just after hurricane season.
Yeah, seriously, we'll have to find that time. Well, anyway, that about wraps it up for this show. If you're missing us already, you can subscribe to the show on iTunes. Just search for the Modern Woodworkers Association. Once you're subscribed, you'll be sure to never miss another exciting episode. And while you're on iTunes, please leave us a 5-star rating, even if you don't think we deserve one, because it'll help our rank so others can more easily find us.
And if you want to find out more about the Modern Woodworkers Association, be sure to visit modernwoodworkersassociation.com, follow the MWA on Twitter at MWA_national, like the MWA on Facebook, or circle the Modern Woodworkers Association on Google+.
It beats circling the drain, I'll tell you that much.
Just today, as I was setting up for this hangout, I updated the MWA Google+ URL, so now we can be found at googleplus.com, google.com/plus Modern Woodworkers Association, which is awfully easy to say.
Yeah, it's just a mouthful. It just flows trippingly off the tongue.
Or just go to Google Plus and look for search for Modern Woodworkers Association. While you're there, you can join the MWA community, which does actually technically work very easily and effectively. And we're constantly having a conversation there. So I'd ask you to join us for project sharing, discussion, and loads of woodworking banter.
And since he's not here, Can I say his line?
Only if you're him.
Okay. I'm Chris Atkins of HighRockWoodworking.com and at HighRockWW on the Twitters. He's going to drive to Tampa and beat my ass.
And, excuse me. I'm Dyami Plotke of PenultimateWoodshop.com. I am at Dyami Plotke on the Twitters. And who are you, Tom?
Oh, by the way, I'm the resident shop monkey, Tom Iovino of Tom'sWorkbench.com and at Tom's Workbench on Twitter. Until we see you next time, we wish you happy sawdust. I'm going to be sleeping with one eye open.